When missiles began raining down on Gaza and Israeli cities, the world watched on helplessly as the conflict escalated with no end in sight. However, one leader was prepared to break the silence in a shocking message that could change the course of the crisis. Vladimir Putin issued a stark warning to Israel to stop this now. In these geopolitical developments, staying informed about global affairs becomes increasingly crucial. If you're into cars, current events, and finding out what's happening around the world, this is the channel for you. By subscribing, you'll get all the latest updates and deeper dives into the stories shaping our automotive and global landscapes. We work hard to deliver insightful, in-depth videos so you stay informed. Subscribe now to join our community and not miss a single update. Now, let's unravel the surprising stance taken by Russian President Vladimir Putin amidst this crisis. Despite Russia's strong ties with Israel, Putin has approached this situation with caution. Moscow maintains diplomatic connections with both Israel and Hamas, refraining from categorizing the latter as a terrorist organization. During a meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani in Moscow, Putin voiced concerns about the escalating death toll on both sides of the conflict. While condemning acts of violence from both Israel and Hamas, Putin pointedly placed a significant portion of the blame on U.S. policies, using the opportunity to underscore what he perceives as a failure of U.S. strategy in the Middle East. Russia's strategy involves delicately balancing positive relations with all parties involved, aiming to avoid being coerced into choosing a side between Israel and Iran. Vasily Nebenzia, Russia's UN ambassador, called for a humanitarian truce and presented a draft resolution to the UN Security Council condemning all violence against civilians and acts of terrorism. On October 13th, Nebenzia criticized the West, particularly Brussels, for allegedly overlooking Israeli Air Force attacks on civilian infrastructure in Gaza. He also held Washington responsible for the escalating conflict in the Middle East. However, the Russian draft resolution faced opposition from France, Japan, the UK, and the US, ultimately failing to pass in the UN Security Council. Nebenzia attributed this failure to the perceived self-interest of the Western Bloc. As tensions persist since October 7th, Russia's role in mediating the Israeli-Palestinian crisis remains a complex and nuanced diplomatic challenge. Russian authorities have maintained constant communication with counterparts in Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey, addressing various aspects of the Israel-Palestine conflict. This includes concerns about the precarious situation of Palestinian refugees and the potential for the conflict to spill over. By engaging with regional players, Moscow has successfully expanded and strengthened its economic ties throughout the Middle East, according to Dr. Samuel Ramani, an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Russia has strategically linked its involvement in the Israel-Palestine conflict to broader issues in other regions. For instance, Iraq tied their support for the Palestinian cause to economic agreements, particularly related to adherence to OPEC+. Despite the historic attack by Hamas resulting in an estimated 1,400 Israeli deaths during Operation Elusive Flood, Russian President Vladimir Putin did not reach out to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to express condolences. This was surprising given the long-standing relationship between Putin and Netanyahu. Observers were taken aback by Moscow's decision not to reciprocate gestures to Israel, especially considering Israel's neutral stance on the Russian invasion and occupation of Ukraine since February 2022. Russia's primary goal is to quell further violence and establish stability in the Israel-Palestine situation. Moscow actively supports a UN Security Council resolution that mandates a ceasefire between the conflicting parties. Additionally, Russia has offered to mediate disputes between Israel and Hamas, leveraging its diplomatic relationships. The impact of the Israel-Palestine conflict on Russia's national interest remains uncertain. Moscow acknowledges potential benefits and drawbacks, and the outcome will heavily influence these dynamics. The conflict could serve as a diversion from the Ukraine crisis, potentially reducing scrutiny on Russian actions. Dr. Colin P. Clark, the director of strategy and research at the Southend Group, notes that Putin may benefit from less attention on the Kremlin, with events in Gaza drawing more focus. In an interview with TNA, Dr. Colin P. Clark emphasized that Putin likely welcomes the shift in attention away from the crisis in Ukraine. There is speculation about potential advantages for Russia if money and weaponry are redirected from Ukraine to Israel, as suggested by some US lawmakers. This could provide the Russian military with an advantage. However, there are differing opinions on the potential consequences for Washington's military support to Ukraine, with some experts suggesting a shift in favor of increased arms sales to Israel. Dr. Mark Katz, a professor at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy, provides insights into these perspectives. The Russian government's approach to the Israel-Palestine conflict is centered on positioning itself as an alternative to the US. By endorsing the Palestinian cause and actively advocating for a two-state solution, Moscow aims to bolster its soft power influence in the Middle East and the Global South. Russia seeks to resonate with the Global South, particularly in the Arab and Islamic world, by presenting itself as a counterforce to the US. This strategic maneuver is designed to tap into anti-American sentiments prevalent in nations with a Muslim majority, potentially enhancing Russia's sway in the region. Moscow believes that by aligning with the international and Arab mainstream in supporting a two-state solution, it can showcase its diplomatic prowess and counter perceptions of global isolation. This calculated approach is part of Russia's broader strategy to wield influence on the global stage by championing a stance that contrasts with that of the United States. In the broader context of the Israel-Palestine conflict, Russia's apprehensions extend beyond the immediate crisis, encompassing potential repercussions for the entire Middle East. Moscow is concerned about the conflict escalating and spreading to neighboring nations like Syria and Lebanon. Of particular worry to Russian authorities is the possibility of Hezbollah fighters having to withdraw from Syria if a full-scale conflict erupts between Israel and Lebanon. This concern is compounded by Syria's economic challenges and political instability, which could impact Russia's influence over the Assad government. Russia is also wary of being compelled to choose sides between Israel and Iran, both of which it maintains robust ties. Moscow aims to avoid a scenario where it must pick between these alliances, preferring to maintain a delicate balance. Despite certain factions within Russia promoting pro-Iranian and anti-Israeli narratives, the government desires to sustain relations with both Iran and Israel. The potential involvement of Iran in a conflict poses a dilemma for Moscow, especially if Iran's ability to support the Russian military effort in Ukraine were to diminish. This could distract one of Russia's few allies, potentially limiting its assistance in controlling the situation in Ukraine. The impact of the Gulf Cooperation Council states, notably Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, is also a source of concern for Moscow. The impact of the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC states, notably Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, is also a source of concern for Moscow. A broader conflict between Israel and Iran could have significant repercussions on peace and stability in the Gulf, which is crucial to Russia due to its energy policies and economic ties. Moscow is acutely aware of the intricate dynamics at play and the potential risks to its influence in the Middle East. The ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict, with no immediate ceasefire in sight, raises questions about Russia's actual sway in the region. Moscow's call for a ceasefire are taken seriously, as the longer the conflict persists, the less impact Russia may have in the Middle East. As the situation continues to evolve, the true impact of Russia's foreign policy priorities remains uncertain. The complex interplay of regional dynamics and global geopolitics adds layers of uncertainty to Moscow's position in the face of the Israel-Palestine conflict. In a world of diplomatic chess, Russia's moves in the Israel-Palestine conflict reveal a strategic dance between allies and potential pitfalls. The fear of choosing sides in the Middle East complex interplay create a geopolitical puzzle for Moscow. As the plot thickens, do you think Russia is the chess master or just a pawn in the game of influence? If you enjoyed unraveling the layers of geopolitical strategy, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more insights, and don't forget to share your checkmate theories in the comments below. We're ready for some geopolitical banter.